morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buckchester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today, our guest is fired up about sharing her book with you. Her name is H.A. Mitchell, and the book is entitled, I Promise It's Not Your Fault. Now, you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee, or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, H.A. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad that you are here. Now, I can't wait to talk to you about your book, but as is tradition here on the show, we always give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves to perhaps those few people out there that are unfamiliar with you or your work. So my first question to you is what makes you you?
Probably just being a lifelong trauma survivor. Going through everything that I've gone through has just made me strong to the point where I know that I can pretty much get through anything, and I just have learned that my goal in life is to help other people do the same.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I have told people that we do have to keep things in perspective, right? That in order to appreciate the sunshine, we have to get through the rain, but
Yep.
it's not going to always be sunny, you know, that life just is that way. And if we can persevere and get through, we are definitely stronger on the other side. So I hear you. That totally makes sense. Now, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do? Or did you find that life simply presented it and you saw it for the opportunity to share your story?
When I was younger, I used to write the longest letters to people. And we're talking like almost a short story. It'd be like 15, 16 pages. You know, I had to tell my whole life story in each letter to make sure they knew what was going on. And my mom always told me, you know, you're really good at that. You should, you know, pursue that a little bit more. And I always did really well in English, which was probably the only subject that I really did well in school. I wrote short stories as a kid, but nothing ever really came about like thinking that I had the potential to be an actual author. But then this all came about, and finally, I guess it clicked in my mind, was like, yes, this is what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be using the power of words to help people understand that these traumas do happen, but they can be dealt with. And so here I am now.
Absolutely. You know, I was interviewing another author, and they said something similar as well, that their mother was one of their biggest encouragers, and said when they too were, you know, a young person, said, you know, this might be something that you really want to look into. And it is absolutely beautiful how, even though we may not see it in the beginning stages, that if we're really true to who we are, we realize, you know, I do like doing this. This does bring a certain amount of joy or happiness or accomplishment to my life. Maybe I should research this, you know, step out into it a little more. And I'm so glad that you share your story here with this book. Now, the title of your book, I like the words that you have chosen. Can you tell us why you chose those particular words to entitle your book?
I chose that set of words just simply because I wish that's something that someone would have said to me when I was little. You know, if it's not a be all end all, you know, I say that to you and you're automatically healed of all your traumas. No. But what it is it's that confirmation that we did nothing to cause what has happened to us. And you know, especially when you're little, you tend to take on the world. You know, you don't understand how to differentiate between adult stuff and kid stuff. You know, so I wanted kids to know, look, this is adult stuff. It's not your fault. It has affected your life, but you had nothing to do with it. So I just simply chose to title it, I Promise It's Not Your Fault.
I love that. So with your book, let me ask this. I know that it's a children's book, but anyone of any age is able to read the book. But at what age, like what age group, when we think of children's books, sometimes it's little kids like elementary school. Are you talking more like middle school? What's the ideal age range for the child to be able to read your book and understand your message?
I would say probably 3rd grade and up. Like I said, I think it should be read to children of all ages, but the littler ones are going to definitely need, parental assistance to help understand and stuff. But I think by 3rd grade, they should be able to read it, maybe not process all of it, but process a majority of it. So, probably,
right.
Yeah,
okay. So that would be a good way too, to kind of spark conversation. So if you're reading, the child can pause. They're old enough to understand, but if they have questions, they can also have that conversation with the caretaker or a parent, whomever is reading the book, and be able to understand the bits and pieces that maybe is a little fuzzy for them. Gotcha. I like it. I like it. Now, as far as your writing process was concerned, did you find that you needed a particular environment in order to write? Like, did you need early morning, late afternoon? Did you go off like to the park or sit on your, outside? Did you have a particular environment that you needed in order to really get your thoughts out of your head and down into the format that would eventually become your book?
It's funny. My environment is my mind. As weird as that sounds, I just have so many things going through my mind all the time that I can pretty much turn into a story at any given moment. So if I need writing material, or if I'm feeling like there's something that I want to write, all I have to do is just kind of stop and withdraw into my own mind, and it becomes this crazy environment for all kinds of different ideas and different ways to get stories started. It's kind of a weird process, but for me it works.
Absolutely, and that's what's important, right?
Yes, I guess so.
If it's weird for anyone else, that's because it's not their, it's not their goal, it's not their vision, it's not their calling. It's like, if it works for you, then God bless it. Do what needs to be done and make it happen. So I love that. Now, how did you come about the idea for this book? I know some authors have said they're inspired by music. Others say they look at the situations that their own kids are dealing with, or what's going on, in the world and society. How did you come up with the idea for this book?
Including all of the other traumas that I've survived throughout my life, the one that affected me the most deeply was when I was 9 years old. My best friend and I were both sexually assaulted by a man that went to my church. And from that day, our entire worlds were shattered. We didn't know up from down, left from right, who to trust, who not to trust. And so we just never talked about it. We just let it go. We didn't tell our parents. We didn't tell anyone. I held that secret in for 28 years. And it chewed at me like a dog with a rawhide bone. I mean, it just, some days it would feel like that dog was eating half the bone and it was tearing at me, just threatening to engulf me. And then there'd be days, where it'd feel like the dog just kind of chased the rawhide around for a minute, and it wasn't so bad. I could handle it. Then it got to the point where I finally started noticing that it was really affecting my life and how I was treating people, how I was treating myself. And so I made the decision to go back to the town where I was sexually assaulted in, and I wanted to look for the man who had done it. I wanted to knock on his door and look him in the eye and let him know that he did not destroy me like he thought he was going to. So my boss took me. He is an incredible man. He's been a huge support to me through all of this. And he took me back there, and we went and we knocked on doors, and I didn't find him. But I did write a couple of different things. I had written a letter to him telling him how he had affected my life, what he had done had affected my life, and then just had written a short story about everything that had happened. And I ended up mailing those to his family's business. I didn't want to do that way, but at the same time, I could no longer let them live their lives in this, kind of fantasy world that their dad was perfect. I know we all like to think that our parents are perfect, but sometimes they are just not. And so, there's grandkids in their family, and I did not want to take the chance, of something happening to someone else, because I did, after 28 years, I didn't know if he'd done anything to anybody else or not. So I went ahead and mailed those, but I was still feeling, I don't know the word, hopeless, I guess, in a way, like this feeling was never going to go away. And so when I came home, I just got to thinking, something's got to change. How can I change all this trauma now after all these years? And I just thought to myself, you know what? I can't change what's happened to me, but hopefully I can change things that have happened or, for another child so that they don't ever have to feel like they're dirty, disgusting, or damaged. They don't ever have to go to bed feeling like they don't want to wake up the next morning like I did. And so it was really just a way for me to finish that healing process, but to help other people heal at the same time.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. Thank you for being brave and for realizing that I can't hold this anymore. This is too big for one person to have to hold in such a secret. Thank you for being brave and stepping out and not allowing it to totally and completely consume you, and for choosing to share. That is so brave of you, and thank you so much for doing that. Now, one last question before we go to break, and that is, you decided to make the main character a boy instead of a girl. Why did you do that?
Because as far back as we can remember, it has always been said that the men are supposed to be the strong, stable ones. They're the breadwinners. They're the head of the household. They don't show emotions. They're not scared of anything. And that's just simply not true. Men are just as human as women. Men are just as susceptible to becoming victims of sexual assault of any of these traumas as women are. And so I wanted to, kick that misconception in the, rear end, so to speak. And I wanted to say, hey, look, even though the first part of this is my story, I wanted it to be a boy because boys can go through everything that girls go through. And I want boys to understand that it is okay to speak up and out. It is okay to cry. And it is okay to hurt. But that you do not have to do it alone just because you're a boy. And society says, oh, you can't come to us with that. So that was the process in making.
Right. Yeah. That was really smart, because you're right. We teach our boys that they can't cry. They're not supposed to be in touch with their emotional side at all. That they're supposed to be stoic, and they're too. That
Yep.
that is so true. We do that disservice to our boys. So wow, very very smart of you to make that all encompassing. I love it. Well, AJ, it is time for us to go to a break. So before we do, can you please remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, if anyone who wants to reach out to you, how should they do that?
Yes, it's called I Promise It's Not Your Fault. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or anywhere else books are sold. You can find me on Facebook under Heather Ann Mitchell.
We'll be back. we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. My guest today is H.A. Mitchell, and we're talking about her book, I Promise It's Not Your Fault. And such a great title for such a topic, especially with it being a kid's book. Now, AJ, one of the questions I wanted to ask you about is relating to traumas. So, are the traumas that Ben experiences, do you make them similar to the trauma that you experienced? If so, why or why not?
Yes, it is exactly everything that I experienced from the time that I was born until the time that I was 15. I just wanted a way to tell, my story and have a boy be the character, just to let kids know that all of these different things can happen at all different ages, and nobody's immune to it, unfortunately. So yeah, it's sorry, go ahead.
No. Okay, just wanted to make sure you completed your thought there. Absolutely, you are so right. It can, and I think that sometimes people think that certain things, like certain types of trauma, only happen to certain genders, and that's incorrect as well. It's not just certain things happen to girls or certain things happen to boys. Like you said, a predator is a predator, and they're going to take advantage of any young person that they're able to, and it's just so sad that is still happening in our society today. Now, in your book, Ben's best friend is the one who noticed, if I understand correctly, is the one that noticed that there was something wrong. Did you as well have a family member or someone that noticed that something was going on, or were you brave enough to kind of share the story? What happened there?
No, I was not brave enough to come out that I had been sexually assaulted. Really growing up, it was the large part just me and my mom. She was a single mom, and so it was just her and I kind of taking on the world. And I think that in some ways she knew something was wrong. She had tried to put me into therapy at one point, and I just absolutely refused to talk. She was like, if you're not going to talk to me and tell me what's going on, you're going to talk to somebody. Although, I shut down because I did not want anyone to know. None of my friends had any idea that, they knew of the other traumas, like the abandonment and the losing my sister and my grandma and stuff like that. They knew about all that stuff because they were there when it happened, and we talked about it. But as far as the sexual assault, the only other person that knew about it was the person who did it, and then my best friend who unfortunately was a victim of it as well.
Was there as well, right? Oh my goodness. Mm-hmm. Now, why did you decide to include kind of a Q&A, if you will, at the end of the book? Why was that an important resource to have available?
Well, the book covers pretty much everything from divorce to human trafficking as far as traumas go. And so, unfortunately, with it being a kid's book, you can't really explain in depth each different trauma and, signs to watch out for. So you just kind of have to give it a brief, generalized description. So when I chose to do the question and answer, it was simply so that I could shed some light on specific topics, like being gay or transgender, racism, sexual assault, and death. Those are some of the biggest traumas that kids face. And so I wanted to let each child, express questions and things that they wanted to know, and then gave them a direct answer that was specific to that individual trauma, instead of just that brief overall kind of glance at it in the book itself.
Smart. I like that. I like that. So if you needed to go deeper, then you could. You had that resource at the end. I like that. That is so useful. No, do do you personally feel like it was better to have waited until you were an adult to open up about being assaulted, or do you feel as though everything would have been different if you were able to have shared when you were younger? Now, please understand my question. Not shaming, not blaming, not trying to victimize in any way, but just as an adult looking back, do you think that it would have changed anything if you had said something at that moment as opposed to as an adult?
Yes and no. The one thing that I regret in not having spoken up about it sooner was the fact that there may have been more victims that nobody knows about. That's the one thing that kind of has haunted me over the years. But in reality, the Lord knew what He was doing, having me wait until now to come out with that. Because if I had come out with it early on, this project probably never would have come to fruition. And this is something that is so desperately important, so desperately needs to be talked about. And I know these are subjects that, generally make anybody want to curl up in a ball and cry to themselves, not go talk to people. But you can't hold things like that in. And so I just think that if I had went through it and opened up about it earlier, that this project would have never happened. So, yes and no. It's kind of a double-edged sword, I think.
Yeah, of course. And I can understand that. Wanting to, inform someone and say, help me get through this. But at the same time, just, you were a child as well. And that's why just in case anyone else is going through that, I wanted to make sure that I said, it wasn't your fault. Like the title of the book, it's not your fault.
Yep.
You did what you could as a child. And as an adult, we process things differently. And you're right. It may or may not have made a difference, but you're making a difference now. And I'm so glad again that you're being brave enough to share and to write about it. Now, speaking along that same vein, and I loved how you said that, God placed on your heart to go ahead and write that book. Do you think that in writing the book, it has helped you with your own personal journey to healing?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, sitting there watching each word as I translated it from my mind onto the page was healing in and of itself, because it made me realize that I already knew all of this in my mind. It was already in there. I'm just as loved, just as wanted, and just as needed as anybody else, whether that comes from 1,000 people or just myself. I'm worth it. And those were things that I struggled with all my life. I woke up every day wanting to die. I gained weight. I had all these issues from it when it was all in my mind, how to get away from it. And I still struggle with it. I still have my days. But I can now look at myself and realize that at one point I was a victim, but now I'm a survivor. And those are two completely different things.
Amen to that. You are definitely a survivor, and I love it. I love that you have been able to take your power back in the way that is best for you, and you're trying to share that with others. I love it. Now, when you were in the process of writing, you were doing what you needed to do to get your thoughts out. You're writing the book. You're choosing what it needs to look like, and all of those things. And you sent it off to the publisher, and you now hold your completed work in your hands. How did you feel in that moment to have your finished copy of I Promise It's Not Your Fault in your hands?
That's a tough one. And the reason for that is because, when you suffer an insurmountable amount of trauma in your life, you get to a point where you kind of become numb inside. And there's not really anything that anybody can take to get that away. You're just kind of numb, so you don't feel things the way that you should. And this last year has been one of the most traumatic of my entire life. So when the book got here and I looked at the copies, it was just like I had bought somebody else's children's book. And I think a lot of that is, you know, people talk about me being brave and stuff like that and coming out. It's not so much bravery as it is a necessity. Our children are being irreparably damaged daily by adults who have been irreparably damaged. You know, there is a severe trickle-down system in this whole realm of trauma. And if we don't start helping these babies from the time that it happens, or even before it happens, we're setting them up for a lifetime of feeling like I and so many others have felt like we weren't good enough. We didn't deserve to be here. No one respected us. And nobody deserves to feel like that ever, but especially a poor, innocent child who does not even understand what has just happened to them, let alone why it happened. So.
Yeah. I think you have a lot of people listening that are nodding their heads saying, yes, we have to do more to make sure that we are protecting our little ones. And moms, dads, caretakers, grandparents, it is okay for you to protect your little one. We don't care what anyone else says. So definitely do that, which is best for your kid. I definitely understand that. Now, before I let you go, I have about maybe 2 more questions for you. And one is for someone who they are now an adult and something happened to them. Perhaps it's like their situation, but just something. They have experienced a trauma. Do you have any advice for them as far as being able to perhaps find their voice and go from victim to survivor?
Well, I think the first thing that anyone who's been traumatized, I think what they do is they automatically retreat into themselves. They're that confident person who used to be there, who could put themselves out there, can no longer do that. They retreat back into themselves. And so the first thing that I would suggest to anyone is talk to someone. Anyone. I don't care if it's a therapist, your teacher, a priest. I don't care who it is. Just go and tell someone. You are not going to be judged for the traumas that you've suffered. And if you are, those are the kind of people you need to stay away from anyway. So go and speak with someone. Tell them what has happened. Let them help you, give you the resources to start dealing with this. The second thing I think that is extremely important is to find a creative outlet for the pain, for the PTSD that comes along. And that doesn't have to make sense to anybody. It can be throwing rocks in the lake, you know, just whatever makes you feel serene and at peace with yourself and at peace with the healing process. And then just work on that until you feel like you can start to bring yourself out of, you know, that creative outlet and put yourself into other situations where you can then be creative outside of your own little projects. But I think the main thing is just you have to remember that there are so many people out there who have gone through what you've gone through. We do not all go through the same experiences. We just come away with some of the same lessons learned. But I think that the reason that trauma exists the way that it does is so that we can go through those individual trials and tribulations, but then we can also turn to other people and talk about it. And when you start to talk about it, you open up that dialogue and it starts to get easier to talk about things. You know, it's never easy to look at someone for the first time and say, I've been sexually assaulted, or somebody I love died, or, you know, it's never easy to say that the first probably 1,000 times you say it. But the more you say it, the more it becomes, unfortunately, a normal, because that is your new normal. When you've been traumatized, you have a whole new normal. You know, you're generally emotionally stunted to the age you were when the first real big one happened. So that makes communication and opening up so much harder. At least for me anyway. I found that I have very much 9-year-old temper tantrums sometimes. You know, because I can't get out of that mindset that I was when I was that age and all that. Because my world stopped that day, as does everybody's who's sexually assaulted. Your entire world stops. You no longer have a sense of self, a sense of trust, a sense of anything other than an overwhelming sense of disgust for yourself. And so you just have to keep talking. You know, and I hate to use this analogy, but it's like Dory says on Finding Nemo, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. You literally just have to keep talking. You know, because
that's perfect. Right.
You know, that's the only way that, we can't get the help that we need if no one knows that we need the help. Right. And as hard as it is to take that first step, once you take that first step, it will get easier. You're never going to forget it. You know, it's never going to be completely gone, but there will be ways that you can eventually figure out how to embrace it, you know. And the more you embrace it and the more you realize that, hey, yes, I've been a victim of this, but now I'm a survivor of this, then it becomes easier to talk about it, you know. And then we can get people opened up and,
Well, AJ, you have definitely, I think, inspired someone to, as you said, go and talk to someone that you trust, that you can share this with, and that you can get the help that you need to go from victim into mode and new title of survivor. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and presenting your book to us today. And what a great resource that we have. So if there's a child that needs to be able to talk, there's a book that's going to help them in that communication and start that dialogue. So thank you so much for that. Now, before I let you go, can you please remind everyone of the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, if anyone wants to reach out to you, how should they do that?
Yes, it's called I Promise It's Not Your Fault. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or anywhere else that books are sold. And you can reach me on Facebook. It's Heather Ann Mitchell. And I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to read it, and I hope you enjoy it.
Absolutely. Thank you again for being a guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to meet you and talk with you.
Thank you. And listeners, thank you for spending time with us here as well. I think that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you today. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day. And thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. The scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today, we want you fired up about this author. His name, David Pitman. His book, The Expectations of Honor. So you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, David. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Good morning, Dr. Angela. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning.
I am so happy that you made the call. I can't wait to talk to you about your book. Now, as we do here on my show, I love to give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves to perhaps one or two people out there that are unfamiliar with you or with your work. So my first question is, what makes David Pitman David Pitman?
Well, first of all, it's my parents. I had the best parents in the history of the world, and they were God-fearing parents who loved their kids and loved each other, first and foremost, for their kids. And because of that, they translated that love to each of their kids in an expectation of what we kids should see in the male or female spouse of our future. And that's really what's set me up as being the type of man I am today and what I look forward to talking with you about, Dr. Angela.
Absolutely, absolutely. So being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you simply find that that was just the next thing along your life path?
Actually, it's not something I ever fancied myself to be, Dr. Angela. I never was a good writer in my mind. I was challenged in school with getting good grades, and I had to work really hard to get grades. But I did finish college with a lot of hard work, and then it was just one of those things where it was the next step in life to write a book about this topic.
I can definitely understand that. So many of the guests who have been on say, nope, never thought in a million years that I would be an author, but so glad that that has become something that they do, that that they've been able to do in their lives. Now, the title of your book,
Absolutely.
of Honor. How did you come about your title? Did it come to you first? Did it develop out of your writing? How did you select those words to entitle the book?
It was actually, it developed out of my writing, and was actually my publisher who came up with those specific name. I was trying to come up with an idea, but they really had a good concept in what I was trying to do. So they were the ones that came up with the name, The Expectations of Honor. And then they also gave the subtitle, A Young Man's and Young Woman's Guide to a Lifetime of Character. So I thank my publisher for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is what we pay them the big bucks for. So that is great that they were able to come up with such an awesome title. And I like how it stands out just enough to pique your interest when you, back in the regular world, when we used to be able to just kind of scan books as they were up on the bookshelves. So I love it. I love it. Now, did you have a particular inspiration as far as writing in the field of honor, or talking about what it means to respect someone or something?
Well, as I stated in the earlier thought, it was definitely my mother and dad, but it was my mother in particular. I saw what Dad did to honor my mother every day in the 35 years that I knew them in life. And then my mother, as I started getting into my teen years, would start talking to me about respecting a woman and or honoring a woman and cherishing her, and some of the ways we can do that on a daily basis. Whether it's in our work environment, whether it's in our home with our sisters and our female relatives, whether it's out in the environment when we're playing, just any area of life when we're dealing in men-woman relationships as a son or a future man in this world.
Mm-hmm. Now, why is the topic of teaching today's young men and women about relationships important to you? Do you find that more attention needs to be paid to that, and that we've kind of lost something along the generations, or do you feel that it's just a part of your call to purpose?
Well, it is certainly a part of my calling, but I believe that you touched on it right there in your question, that it is something we have lost. A great deal of our society and the world as a whole, I think we've lost that. Growing up in college, when I went to college, growing up in the family I grew up with, I was distressed as a young college kid watching the way the young men and the young women interacted with each other. The perception I had of young men just not even thinking about how to honor a girl, honor a woman, honor the girls in the dorm in their classes. And I also saw the girls not setting an expectation of how they think they should be treated honorably. So that's really where the basis came from for my wanting to address this topic.
And I have to agree with you. I think that in generations past, that was something that was simply passed on. It was something that mothers taught to their daughters and something that fathers taught to their sons. And due to I'm going to say the informal status of society today, we are starting to lose some of those customs or norms or very important parts, attributes of what it is to be an adult in the world today. I have to agree with you on that. Now, for someone who says, I love what you're saying, I want to get a copy of David's book, how do you suggest that the reader really takes in the information? Should they read it from cover to cover, or can they simply open it up and start reading at chapter next?
Well, it's not a long book. And, when I was writing this book, God said, you don't need to write 300 pages to tell about honor and respect and chivalry and, love. You don't need to do that. You just need something short and sweet. So, a person can read this book. If they're a good reader, they'll probably be able to read this book in 15 minutes. But the information within the book is something that can be referenced throughout a lifetime, regardless of age. Dr. Angela, I believe that age is not a restriction, even though my book title suggests young men and young women. I believe that men and women, boys and girls of all ages, can learn from this book, from this thought of chivalry and honor.
Absolutely. And that is my next question for you. Regarding who is the ideal reader, did you write this so that our, not just our young adults, but perhaps our teenagers, like high school age, would be able to consume the information as well?
Oh, most absolutely that's the case. I mean, I wasn't specifically looking towards people in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, children of that age. I was looking into the teen years as well, but certainly into the 20s, because those are the formative years of our lives. So even though you're in college and you're supposedly an adult, you're still in the learning years, I believe, of how to treat young men and young women in your life. And here's a good example, Dr. Angela. That's the first time for most kids getting away from home and actually being able to put into practice what hopefully their parents taught them about interpersonal relationship with the opposite sex. So when they go off to college, they're in a dorm room setting, in a classroom setting, all these arenas. Hopefully they'll be able to take what they've learned into those arenas and start applying them, and then eventually become adults of honor, respect, and character.
Oh, I love that answer. Now, you kind of touched on this before, and I really want to give you a little bit more time to expound on that answer, and that is women and girls missing this conversation when it talks about what honor looks like, and how do you not only honor yourself, but how do you expect for others to honor you as well? Can you expound on that just a little bit more? How do you address that in the book?
Yeah, Dr. Angela, what I'm really trying to get at is that I believe that girls and women, they should learn at a young age how to set relationship expectations with all boys and all men throughout their lives. And learning at a young age in particular is the best way to set that stage for being able to do that as they go throughout their life. In fact, so I use a Bible verse, Proverbs 11, number 16 through 17, verses 16 through 17 says, "A gracious woman gets honor, and violent men get riches. A man who is kind benefits himself, but a cruel man hurts himself in a selfish manner." And I chose that verse because I believe that women who really look at the side of a man, treating them with honor, are going to know how to determine which men they should have in their lives, which men they should not have in their lives. And they should make a choice, a conscious choice, that this man is good for me and this man is not. And within that, Dr. Angela, they also have a chance to hopefully teach a man who's not very honoring, if he's open to learning how to respect her and maybe carry that on to other women in his life. So she can actually be a teacher that benefits a man in his life.
Oh, I love that answer. And I'm so glad that you gave us something to chew on. So it's time for us to go to break. But before we do, David, could you please remind everyone, what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Well, okay, my name is David Pitman. I live in Arvada, Colorado, and the title of my book is The Expectations of Honor, A Young Man and Young Woman's Guide to a Lifetime of Character. And the book is available most prominently on barnesandnoble.com, and you can check with any retailer and give them that title to get it for you. And you can best keep in touch with me at my email address, awalkforjesus and .ncsu1@gmail.com.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buster. You know what I like to do on this show. I want to enlighten you, inspire you, and empower you. So today we have on David Pitman, and the title of his book is The Expectations of Honor. I know that is a really great title for a book. My next question for you, David, is this time it's the guy's turn. So with the boys and men, do you think is missing when it comes to their conversations about honoring the women or the girls that are in their lives?
Well, I think a lot of what boys and men are missing is the way men are created. I think a lot of what they're missing is they are not being taught how to treat and honor a woman. And since girls, if they're not being taught the same thing, girls in their weakness can actually try to use a man's weakness to be drawn to the girl. So what I'm trying to say there, as an example, I'll use 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. And it says, "Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered." And a part of that, the weaker vessel, I want to address that. In today's world, when you say weaker vessel and apply it to the woman, people might get confused and think women are weaker than men in every aspect. Well, that's certainly not true. Women certainly have strengths that men don't have in the areas of compassion, love, caring, and just keeping a home in the way men can't. And men also have strengths that women don't have. And I also like to use Proverbs 7, verses 6 through 7. And it's in Proverbs 7, what a father is doing is warning his son about an adulteress being a girl or a woman who does not have the proper training or expectations of what the man is looking for. So in Proverbs 6, it says, "For at the window of my house I have looked out through my lattice, and I have seen among the simple, I have perceived among the youths a young man lacking sense." And that is portraying a woman finding a man who's weak in his understanding of how he should treat a woman and what a woman's expectations are of him to be treated. So when you have that combination, Dr. Angela, I believe that you've got a train wreck waiting to happen, which is where our society is today and the world in general when it comes to man and woman, boy and girl relationships. It is a total train wreck because people have fallen asleep on their expectations of how we should treat each other in opposite sex relationships.
Oh, that was such a wonderful answer. So not only did you just, give opinions, but you gave the scripture to help give us an example to help paint that picture and wrap it back around to faith. And I think that's so important because we do turn to scripture or we should turn to scripture to our instructions, our, guiding light to help us know what we should do or what we shouldn't do as well. So thank you for that awesome answer. I love that. Now, for so many people, they're saying, this is really kind of hitting home for me. My parents got divorced perhaps when I was a little kid, or others maybe say, well, one parent passed away and the other parent didn't get married for quite some time. So I didn't have that opportunity to see that interaction. And I love that you're trying to give that great foundation. But for the person that needs the picture to be painted a little bit more vividly for them, can you give us some examples of ways a young man can honor a young woman that can be a part of their character for a lifetime?
Yeah, Dr. Angela, and the beauty of what God has done through my book is by making it short so you get into those nuts and bolts really quickly. So, for example, one of the first things my mother did was, I remember when I was probably in 10th grade, she said, "Okay, David, let's have you open my car door so I can step in." And then subsequently, when we got on the other end of the journey, she said, "Now, David, climb out of the car, walk around and open my door so I can climb out." She proceeded to say, "This is what you should do for every woman you meet, especially a woman you are looking at possibly making a future life with together forever." So that would be one example. Another example would be holding a woman's coat open so she can easily slip it on. Everybody knows, Dr. Angela, how hard it is to put a coat on, reaching our arms behind, swinging the other arm around. And if a woman is in a dress, oh my gosh, that makes it even, with long flowing sleeves, that makes it even more difficult. So as a man, we can really help show honor by holding her coat, making it easier. And another good example would be, and I remember Mother doing this in a restaurant to me once. So as a teenage boy, that was kind of uncomfortable, but Dad fully agreed. And Mother said, "Okay, David, go ahead and pull out the chair so I can sit down and slide under." And so I did that in this public place, and oh boy, is that hard as a teenage boy. But now as I learned, Dr. Angelo, what happens is it's great, because when you date a woman or when you go out with a woman as a boy, she may have on a long dress again. And if she's getting that chair, trying to get underneath that table with the dress kind of down by her ankles and sliding in, it could get caught. It's just uncomfortable and difficult. And so that is where we men can really help in that honoring side of things. And do I have a little bit more time to give a couple more examples, Dr. Angela?
Oh, yes, please, by all means.
Okay, well, this is one which I use a picture in the front of my book, Dr. Angela, which I really think tells the story of where boys and girls become selfish at a young age and they just don't realize it. And it's holding an umbrella for a woman so she doesn't get her makeup wet, her hair doesn't get wet and start running, and her clothes get wet. And this little picture in the front of the book is of two boys standing under an umbrella in their shorts. And here's this cute little girl, probably about 3, in her flowing pink dress, just getting poured on with rain. Her hair is all run down. She's just got these tears coming out of her eyes, and the boys are just jovial and happy. And so this is one of those pictures that I think really paints where boys can honor a woman by helping her keep her beautiful look when they go out on a date, especially when weather may be inclement like that. And then another thing would be when you're out on a date, let's say the woman drops her napkin. Well, women, in the way they dress, oftentimes, it's not very dignified. Women don't necessarily feel comfortable suddenly reaching down with their dress kind of binding. Maybe there's a low cut or something. And so it's best for a man to just say, hold on, let me pick that up for you, to get up out of his seat, walk around, pick up the napkin, and give it back to her. So those are a couple more examples of things that boys can do, young men of any age can do to really show honor to the woman and women in their lives, especially in dating and marriage relationships.
David Pitman, thank you for coming on and reminding us of who we should be. Thank you again for being on the show. But before I let you go, can you please remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
It is The Expectations of Honor, a young man's and young woman's guide to a lifetime of character. And it's available at barnesandnoble.com and other retailers. And you can be in touch with me at awalkforjesus.ncsu1@gmail.com.
Thank you again, David, for being a guest on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angela. It's been a pleasure to spend this time with you. And thank you again for your time and taking an interest in this topic. Let's go change lives for the world.
Absolutely. I love it. And listeners, we hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you today. I believe that we have. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember, you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone.